share my screen.
I'm getting an echo from my own voice, though.
Yeah. Can we disconnect audio from your laptop? Otherwise,
this is because you have to mute your laptop, Maharaj.
yeah,
Then it
he
will come.
already muted, Prabhuji.
But mute the audio. So volume on the laptop as well.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And then you will hear everything from the phone, and you will speak to the phone.
Let me find
Reduce the
out.
volume on a laptop.
You know how to do it. I can't get to the volume. I don't know where.
It's on the right, bottom right corner, Guru Maharaj. In the taskbar, it says speaker headphone. If you highlight to it and just put it on mute. If you see my screen, you can see I've highlighted it here. And if you keep it here.
Okay. How's
I
that?
think at F12 as well. Yeah. Yeah.
How's that? Does that work now?
Yeah, it's working for us, Guru Maharaj.
Okay. There's no echo either.
Okay. That's good to know.
I just hope it lasts. Rishabh, stay on the line, so in case I have some problems, you can guide me here.
Yes, Maharaj.
Let's see, I have to get my glasses. Okay. Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya, Jaya Nityananda, Jaya Dvaita Chandra, Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrindam, Krishna Prita Bhogatyaga, Krishna Tirtevasa, Yavanir Veha, Pratigraha, Ekadasa Upavasa. The next steps are as follows. So we are continuing the list of the 64 items that are the principles of the execution of devotional service. 20 of them are things to avoid, and 20 of them are 44 are those things to accept. So we did the first 5, which were all centered around the relationship with the spiritual master. Now we move into another section here. And these steps are as follows. One should be prepared to give up everything for Krishna's satisfaction. And one should also accept everything for Krishna's satisfaction. Number 7, one must live in a place where Krishna is present, a city like Vrindavan or Mathura or a Krishna temple. 8, one should acquire a livelihood that is just sufficient to keep body and soul together. Number 9, one must fast on the Ekadasi day. No, don't go to the next. We're going to explain these, each one of them in succinct explanation. So the first, Om Gyantimirandasya Ginajana Salakaya Chaksun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutalaya Srimakti Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pucharine Nirvase Sasunyavadi Vastyatya De Satarne Vanchakalpa Tarubhishja Kripa Sindhu Evaja Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namaho Namaha. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So this list that we are reading from is actually taken from Srila Rupa Goswami's Nectar of Devotion, chapter 10, I believe. And here we're doing 6 through 9, which is 4 principles. One of the regulative principles is one should prepare to give up everything for Krishna's satisfaction, and one should also accept everything for Krishna's satisfaction. So we have the example of Arjuna on the battlefield. He had, although he was a devotee, a pure devotee of Krishna, he had his own conception of what was the best thing in the situation he was in, and that was to fight or not to fight. And he chose not to fight because, and he gave reasons. He gave many foundational reasons. The reasons were also glorified as a person who is by nature soft-hearted and kind by nature, which is one of the qualities of the devotees. But Krishna called him a fool because, well, that's a different reason, but the point was that he fought. Ultimately, he decided to fight after hearing from Krishna the principles of pure devotional service. So one of those principles is whatever Krishna wants is bhakti, and whatever Krishna doesn't want is against the principles of devotion or bhakti. So here, this first statement is that one should be prepared, and that's the word has been here is used, and to see how to satisfy Krishna. And if it means giving up something that I'm attached to, then because it's for Krishna's satisfaction, it should be done. And here it also mentions that if there's something I have to accept for Krishna's satisfaction, it also should be done. So Arjuna had to accept the principles of actually fighting. And so because he accepted principles to fight, he was glorious and he was considered to be in the position of pure consciousness. In other words, from a material perspective, it didn't seem like he should fight, but from Krishna's perspective, in order to satisfy Krishna and being convinced to hear the reasons why, in this particular case, that was unique because Krishna put Arjuna into a situation where he had to inquire why he should fight. But I think in our situation, we already accept Krishna's words as absolute. So whatever Krishna wants, that's what we want. And if Krishna wants something we don't want, then we also want that. We also agree with Krishna. So that's the point, whatever satisfies Krishna. Because that is the essential and main principle of bhakti, Krishna's satisfaction. Execution of devotional service means to satisfy Krishna or to please Krishna or to act in conjunction to the instructions given by the spiritual master coming from Lord Shri Krishna himself. Number 7, one must live in a place where Krishna is present. Vrindavan is mentioned, Mathura. We also might say, Mayapur, or here it's mentioned a Krishna temple. Now, does that mean that because I'm not in any one of these three, I'm breaking this principle? Well, if your home is a place for you, yes. But if your home is turned into a temple, in other words, you establish the Lord in the temple, in your home, and you make your home a temple, and that is also a temple. So making the home a temple means that Krishna is worshipped as the main principle of your day-to-day activities. Excuse me. So one can establish a deity in the home, begin regular worship, and offer everything we do, not only the food we eat, but everything we do as an offering to Krishna. And then that home is a mandir also. That's an extension of this definition, but it's practically applicable in this age. where this absolute principle of these three categories and nothing outside of it, there is a little leeway in Kali Yuga that one can make their own home a temple. But if one simply lives in a house and doesn't worship the Lord, then that's not a temple. That is simply, it's just another building. That's all. Okay. Number 8, one should acquire a livelihood that's just sufficient to keep body and soul together. In other words, for those who are in Grihastha life, it's important that they maintain their family responsibilities. And so some employment is required. Of course, Srila Prabhupada eventually wanted devotees to work within the context of devotional arena. In other words, to associate with devotees and work with devotees and make one's livelihood in that way. And we haven't got to that point yet. For some reason, we're still somewhat very much attached to working on the outside world. And we haven't established the Varnashram system yet where devotees can make a livelihood and live within the context of devotee association at the same time. So it is a digression from the absolute principle, but we might, in order to satisfy this particular principle here, we say, well, one should not simply work to accumulate more and more material possessions and more relationships on the outside. In other words, just to keep body and soul together, not too much, not too little. This verse or this principle is illustrated by a verse from the Sri Upanishad, Ishava Samvidam Sarvam, Yat Kinchat Jam Tigat, Tena Japtena Punji Jaha, Magridaha Kwasisiddhanam. That everything animate and inanimate is owned and controlled by the Lord, and one should accept their quota. Excuse me. So quota means what is necessary to keep body and soul together. And so that verse illustrates that one should live in accordance with what one's needs spiritually and materially, and not below that and not beyond that. So one has to work at that in order to stabilize that particular principle. You have to give me a second here. I'll be right back. I need to get something. Okay, I'm back. And the second verse in that series of verses in Sri Upanishad, if one lives according to their quota, then they can aspire to live for hundreds of years, because then life becomes easy and natural. We find in this society in general, people simply work hard for unnecessary material things that have nothing to do with maintaining themselves. The modern materialistic society has presented so many gadgets and so many trinkets and so many types of activities just to tantalize and to attract the living entities to spend money and go on to this fantasy of enjoying various types of things in this world. For a devotee, this is completely unnecessary and contrary to devotional service. So that's why one of the principles of devotional service is simplicity. Simplicity means to live according to your needs, like that. If you have extra, then you can use that to propagate religious principles. You can use it for serving devotees. You can use it for sponsoring programs, doing food distributions, doing various types of programs if you have extra. And that extra becomes a way to further Krishna consciousness for the benefit of others. Number 9, one must fast on the Ekadasi day. So the actual Caitanya-caritamrta is that one completely fasts from all food and water. Actually, every Ekadasi is actually in essence meant to be Nirjala Ekadasi, no. But Prabhupada knew when he started his movement in the Western world, that would be difficult and impossible for the Westerners. And so there are 5 stages or 5 levels of following the Ekadasi fast, which seem to be all acceptable. The absolute principle, according to Shastra, is Nirjala Ekadasi. One lower than that is to drink only water. One lower than that is to take only fruit and milk. One lower than that is to eat only foods that are not cooked. And the lowest of all is to just refrain from grains and beans. So that's the one Prabhupada gave us. He gave us the easiest out of the 5 levels. But he did emphasize the 3rd one. He said, Ekadasi, little fruit, a little milk, and spend time chanting the holy names and hearing the glories of the Lord. Ekadasi is called the mother of devotion. It's such an important spiritual part of our month. It comes twice a day. Ekadasi, dasi means 10. Eka means 1. It means the 11th day before and after the waxing and waning moon. The full moon, like that. It's a very special day. One who follows the Ekadasi properly will get great spiritual merit and find themselves very satisfied. A wonderful day. Sometimes devotees fear that actual day. Uh-oh, here comes Ekadasi. What do we do now? Oh boy, here comes all the austerities. But actually, if we accept that these things are actually joyful and beneficial, then we look forward to these Ekadasi days. Okay, so we can go to the next verse. Datravastago vipra vaishnava pujana sevana paradadi duri visarjana. Number 10 in the list. One should worship datri trees, banyan trees, cows, brahmanas, and devotees of Lord Vishnu. One should avoid offenses against devotional service and the holy name, Srila Prabhupada's purport. There are 10 items in the beginning of devotional service up to the point of worshiping datri trees, banyan trees, cows, brahmanas, and devotees of Lord Vishnu. The 11th item is to avoid offenses when rendering devotional service and chanting the holy names. So the purport just simply complements the translation. So these items are worshipable. Datri trees, I'm not too sure. The word datri actually refers to nurse. We say sometimes Abhuta datri, Soma datri. Datri refers to nurse. I'm not sure what datri trees are. Obviously, they're very holy. I think they have another name in Vedic culture that is more, what's the word? More familiar to us than the word datri. Banyan trees. In the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, the material world is compared to a banyan tree. Cows are very dear to Krishna. In fact, they're the most dear to Krishna. The Brahmins are very dear to Krishna. They are also very dear to Krishna. And devotees of Lord Vishnu, cows, brahmanas, and devotees of Lord Vishnu, these items, we should take some time to worship at least one or more of them. Number 11, one should avoid offenses against devotional service in the holy name. This is a general statement. Things to do and things to avoid. Things to avoid means offenses. Offenses are mentioned. There's offenses against the Lord, offenses against the holy name, offenses against Vaishnavas, offenses against people in general, and offenses against the holy name. So this offenses against these different categories of offenses, we should learn them and very carefully avoid them, especially the offenses against the holy name and Vaishnavas. Okay, next verse. Avaishnava Sangatyaga Bahushishyuna Bariba Bahugrantha Kalavash Babhyasya Vyakhyana Varjiva. The 12th item is to give up the company of non-devotees. 13, one should not accept an unlimited number of disciples. 14, one should not partially study many scriptures just to be able to give references and expand explanations. Here, purport. Accepting an unlimited number of devotees or disciples is a risk, very risky for one who is not a preacher. According to Srila Jiva Goswami, a preacher has to accept many disciples to expand the cult of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This is risky because when the spiritual master accepts a disciple, he naturally accepts the disciple's sinful activities and their reactions. Unless he's very powerful, he cannot assimilate all the sinful reactions of his disciples and has to suffer the consequences. Therefore, one is generally forbidden to accept many disciples. So, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has emphasized this particular statement, which has been mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam in the 4th canto. And therefore, in order to balance the need with this principle, therefore, we want more and more persons to take up the role of spiritual masters, so there won't be such a great burden on those who are already spiritual masters. But of course, one has to qualify themselves in order to do that. So to accept a disciple means to accept sinful activities. So then the spiritual master agrees to do that as a service to the Lord. That way, because the sinful activities of the disciples have to go somewhere. They have to, and the problem doesn't seem to be so much accepting the sinful activities. What is the problem is that once persons become initiated, they again go back to sinful activities. This is the great difficulty that is placed upon the spiritual master when the persons go back to sinful activities, breaking the 4 regulative principles. As Srila Prabhupada said, if you don't chant your 16 rounds after you agree to an initiation, you will suffer. But if you break the principles after your initiation, both you and the spiritual master will have to undergo some difficulties, a lot of difficulties. So we should be very careful once we make that vow or to accept the principles that are required in order to fix ourselves under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master, to follow very strictly. Sometimes we ask, when we see people are not following, we say, well, why did you promise? And now you're not following. A person who promises something and then breaks their promise is a person who is considered to be unreliable or someone who is not trustworthy. So we put a lot of emphasis on this particular principle in order to make both for the spiritual master and the disciple, for them to very easily execute devotional service. But here, there is, of course, another principle is being said that if a spiritual master accepts too many disciples, then even if they are following all of that karmic, what we say, reactions, maybe, and that's one of the reasons why many of our spiritual masters get sick, because of accepting maybe too many disciples, or accepting disciples who have a lot of bad karma when they first came to Krishna conscious, or even worse, taking on disciples who are not serious and again go back to their sinful activities. So it's a very serious relationship, and it should be unto. As the spiritual master agrees to take the disciple back to Godhead, and the disciple agrees to follow the instructions of the spiritual master. As long as that is in place, then the relationship is on the spiritual platform. One should not partially study a book just to pose himself as a great scholar by being able to refer to scriptures. In our Krishna conscious movement, we have limited our study to the Vedic literatures, Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Caitanya-caritamrta, Bhakti Rasamrita. These 4 works are sufficient for preaching purposes. They are adequate for the understanding of the philosophy and the spreading of missionary activities all over the world. If one studies a particular book, he must do so thoroughly. That is the principle. By thoroughly studying an unlimited number of books, one can understand. By thoroughly studying a limited number of books, one can understand the philosophy. Okay, so one should be careful. So Prabhupada is in one particular verse and also in Caitanya-caritamrta, he said, we have given 4 books, and he mentions these 4 here. These are the 4 main books that make up our process of devotional service. Everything is included there. Bhagavad Gita is preliminary study, but it's the basis, it's the foundation for all transcendental knowledge. It's spoken by Krishna himself. It's called Gita Upanishads. It is the words of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And it establishes one in devotional service. Srimad Bhagavatam goes into a deeper aspect of that knowledge by giving Krishna's pastimes in various leelas within the Vaikuntha incarnations, and ultimately ending with Krishna's pastimes in Sri Vrindavan Dham, which are the highest expression of spiritual attainment. There's nothing higher than that. And Bhagavatam is considered to be Amalam Purana, the purest of all the scriptures. And Prabhupada, if you hear from Prabhupada, you'll find that he said everything is in the Bhagavatam. All subject matters you want to learn, you can find in Bhagavatam. And it's pure because there's none of the 4 Purusharthas. The 4 Purusharthas are Artha, Kama, Dhamma, and Moksha. Pious activities, economic development, regulated sense gratification, and the desire for liberation. None of these are illustrated in the Bhagavatam or emphasized. Caitanya-caritamrta is the living Bhagavatam, the life of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his teachings, which are the foundation for our execution of devotional service. As he teaches, the Sankirtan movement by demonstrating it himself, and also gives highest knowledge in the relationship between Radha and Krishna in Vrindavan. It takes Bhagavatam into a more intricate philosophical discussion on the tattva of prema bhakti. Bhakti Rasamrita Sindham, Nectar of Devotion, is the handbook, the guide, the light in the direction on how to execute devotional service, along with many of the pastimes. Srila Prabhupada, repeating his spiritual master, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, says that Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu is none different than Srimati Radharani. She is Bhakti Devi. Here, the whole science in what we say succinct form, we have to say it in succinct form, in other words, in compressed form, of the entire science of pure devotional service is there. If we study the first 19th chapters of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, we have enough knowledge to execute pure devotional service. The next 3 sections go into even deeper aspects. So that is the Bhakti Rasamrita. Prabhupada said, read it once, read it twice, read it thrice. He wanted devotees to read and study that book. So we know how bhakti works. We know what to avoid, and we know what to, focus upon. And these items that are being listed here are coming from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. And Prabhupada said these 4 works are sufficient for preaching purposes. All the knowledge is necessary for our missionary works. If one studies these thoroughly, can understand the philosophy. And it's not important to go to other scriptures to get ideas, so you can be known as a greater scholar in presentation. I find just by reading Srimad Bhagavatam, hearing Bhagavatam, everything becomes clear. It's so complete. Caitanya-caritamrta is just the nectar of Bhagavatam in living form. Okay, so let's see. Maybe we can conclude here, and we did from item 6 to item 14, and then we'll stop and see if we can open it up for discussion.
Thank you so much, Guru Maharaj, for explaining us the favorable and unfavorable items that can help in our devotional service. It was a really nice talk. Devotees, if you have any questions, comments, realizations, please unmute yourself and ask. And it would be nice to have your cameras on while you're during the discussion. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Yes, we're humbly requesting all the devotees to become manifested in their transcendental forms in virile form. Okay, so if anyone wants to comment on any of the ones from 6 to 14, you can remember what we said or go back over it and then see if there's any discussion on any of them. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. While you're waiting, I would like to ask one question about the very 6th point, where it mentioned that that we should worship cows, brahmanas, banyan tree, and Lord Vishnu. So Srimad Bhagavatam also stress about worshipping of Lord Vishnu, not Krishna. How we can contemplate this, Guru Maharaj?
It's the same. Vishnu and Krishna are the same. Vishnu seems to be more a general term, and Krishna is very specific, but it's both the same.
Thank you, Maharaj.
There's only one Krishna, but there's so many Vishnu manifestations. But that's the way the scriptures are written, just like we also sing, Vrindayai Tulsi Devai Kriyayai Gresavasya Vishnu Bhakti Prati Devi Satchivachai. So the scriptures say Vishnu Bhakti. And when devotees try to change it to Krishna Bhakti, I think Prabhupada said you can't change the words in the Shastras. Although she is Krishna Bhakti, and it's not wrong when you say Krishna Bhakti, but we have to follow the Shastric statements. So in the same way, we follow the Shastra. Mentions Krishna, Vishnu.
Thank you, Guru Maharaj.
When Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was glorifying Lord Chaitanya, he wanted to change one verse from Muktipad to Bhaktipad. And so Lord Chaitanya said, very nice, but the verse mentions Muktipad, and you can't change the verse in the Shastra. You just have to understand the meaning accordingly.
Yes. Yes, right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, anyone? Looks like I'm on twice. How did I get on twice? I don't recognize my alter ego there.
Yes,
Raj,
Raj Prabhu. You're on mute, Prabhu.
Hey Krishna Maharaj, thank you very much. Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to you, Maharaj. Maharaj, you're talking about studying. I'm not sure whether you said reading or studying, but let me just go with studying for the moment. Studying the books thoroughly. Now, it seems to me that any book, any of Srila Prabhupada's books, you could read and study for years and years and years, forever. So what do you actually mean when you talk about studying a book thoroughly?
Well, knowing, means to know how to apply it in your life. That's the results of proper study. You take the knowledge. I mean, you can remember the knowledge by repeating the knowledge, and that's a theoretical understanding of the philosophical knowledge. That's nice, but more complete and closer to the process of becoming Krishna conscious is to learn to take that knowledge and apply it in your life. And then once you apply it, and then when that knowledge becomes realized knowledge. So yeah, application of philosophical knowledge brings realization. And realization, when practiced in that way, brings spiritual qualities, characteristics. In other words, spiritual devotees develop the qualities that they are practicing. So yeah, and it's nice if you read and you can repeat. But then again, when you repeat, if someone asks you a question, can you explain it? There's where that's will be the test. You can explain what you're speaking about, That's what it really means. You might say something like you're asking me a question. I should be able to answer your question in relationship to what you are inquiring about. And so if you make a statement based on the scriptures, or if I make a statement based on the scriptures, then you could question that statement. And then the person who is responding has to be able to explain. So if you know that much, that's sufficient.
Very good.
You can just memorize too. That's nice, but if you put on the in the situation where you have to explain it, then will be the test.
Thank you, Maharaj. How important in that study and is trying to memorize verses in Sanskrit?
Hare Krishna, can you hear me?
Your voice is fainted, Guru Maharaj.
What am I supposed to do?
No.
Rishabh still there? Hare Krishna, can you hear me?
Little louder, if you can increase it, maybe volume.
Hare Krishna?
It's hearable, but it's lower than before. No, cannot hear you at all, Guru Maharaj, now.
Maybe on the phone, on the screen, you have upper left corner is a speaker option.
Recording in progress.
Guru Maharaj, see, in this corner there is a button, speaker button. On your mobile.
Hare Krishna, what happened, Mataji? Sorry, I was away from the computer.
Yes, we just cannot hear Guru Maharaj.
Yeah, Maharaj, maybe to try to again mute the computer and turn off the audio from the computer, and just to see what will happen.
Hare Krishna, can you hear me?
Yes, you're back, Guru Maharaj, but your voice is little,
Can you put the mobile phone closer to you, Maharaj?
yeah.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, but it's very fainted. If you keep the mobile closer to you.
So if you can hear me, go like this. If you can hear me, if you can't hear me, go like this. Okay, but the thing is, I can't hear you now.
Oh, Krishna.
You cannot hear us?
You?
Put up the volume from the mobile phone, Maharaj.
Guru Maharaj, you are muted, Guru Maharaj.
You're on mute, Guru Maharaj.
Devi, can you hear me? Unmute yourself, because I can't hear anybody.
We can
I
hear
can
you,
hear
Guru
you, Guru
Maharaj.
Maharaj.
Hari Hari Bol. Sridevi Mataji, you can ask your question.
Okay. Okay. Dear Guru Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to you, Guru Maharaj, for this class today on the essential principles of bhakti. As we were speaking, as we were discussing this and different questions were being asked by the devotees.
Sorry to interrupt, Mataji. I think Guru Maharaj is not able to hear us.
Oh,
Guru Maharaj,
okay.
are you able to hear us, Guru Maharaj?
No sound on this.
Guru Maharaj, are you able to hear us?
Mm-mm.
You must have any idea what to do.
Oh, Krishna.
We can all log off and log back in. Will that help?
Phone keeps flashing. It says Sri Devi is speaking, but there's no volume.
Yeah, he's not able to hear us.
I think it's the network issue.
Can we ask Guru Maharaj to log out and then log back in? Will that help or that won't help?
We can give it a try, Guru Maharaj. You can log out and log back in if he can hear us.
I'll send a WhatsApp message otherwise. One second. I think Guru Maharaj has network problem. It's not connecting. He's lifting the phone, but
Yeah, I think there's a network issues. Might have to.
reconnecting all the time.
Let's give a few seconds. If the network comes back, then he will be online. Just maybe wait for a few seconds, few minutes.